A wide aerial sweep over the Oregon wilderness, dark green pines stretching to the horizon, a storm coming in low across the ridges. The camera drifts down toward a single mountain, long and stony, like a sleeping animal, closer now, through the rain, across the wet ferns, across 5 acres of overgrown brush, to the north face of the ridge, where something is half buried in the moss. Closer still, a square of concrete, set flush into the stone, a steel door, no handle, just one keyhole, rust like dried blood across the metal. A girl is on her knees in front of it, 19 years old, mud on her face, hands torn, rain in her hair, in her palm, a heavy iron key. She slides the key into the lock. Something deep inside the mountain begins to groan, like an old animal waking up, something that has been holding its breath for decades. The door eases outward, half an inch. She stands, she pulls. If you have ever felt completely alone in this world, if you have ever believed that the people who were supposed to love you walked away without a backward glance, if you have ever sat in a small room with your hands folded in your lap and waited for someone to come and no one came, then this story is for you. Because what happened to a 19-year-old girl named Rosalind Underwood on the afternoon of her grandfather's will reading will change the way you think about silence, about absence, about the people you thought had forgotten you. Stay with me, because what she found beneath an Oregon mountain was not what anyone had prepared her for. The office smelled like dust and money and something else underneath, something Rosie could not name. Old paper, maybe, old grief. She sat in the leather chair with her hands folded in her lap. The chair was too big for her. Her feet barely touched the floor. She wore a charcoal suit 2 sizes too large. The donation bin had not been generous. The shoulders sagged. The sleeves swallowed her wrists. She was 19 years old, and as of this morning, she had no one. Across the wide mahogany desk sat a man named Edmund Caldwell. He was older than the books behind him. White hair, pale eyes magnified to twice their size behind thick glasses. He moved slowly. He spoke slowly. He did not smile. "Miss Underwood." "Yes, sir." "Are you ready to begin?" "Yes, sir." He looked at her for a long moment, not the way social workers looked at her, not the way the women at the group home had looked at her. Something else was in his eyes, something she did not understand. It almost looked like love, but that could not be right. She had never met this man in her life. He slid a thin folder across the desk. The folder stopped just short of her hands. She did not reach for it. She had learned a long time ago not to reach for things that might be taken back. "This is the reading of your grandfather's will," he said. "It is a formality. He left very little. He had debts. They consumed most of what he owned." He cleared his throat, a dry sound, like leaves. "After settlement of his outstanding accounts, the remaining liquid assets of his estate amount to $1,472. Rosie nodded. She did not feel anything. She had not expected anything. So nothing was what she had prepared for. Nothing was what she had gotten ready for. On the long bus ride downtown, in the small bathroom of the group home, staring at her own face in the mirror, saying out loud to herself, "Expect nothing, expect nothing, expect nothing." Nothing arrived right on schedule. $1,400 for a man she had not seen since she was 11 years old, a man who had driven her to a building with a green door and kissed her on the forehead and said the words, "I cannot keep you any more," and driven away and never come back, not once, not on her birthday, not at Christmas, not on the day they buried her parents in the same week. 8 years ago, nothing. For 8 years, nothing. So $1,400 felt about right. It felt fair. It felt mathematically correct. In a way Rosie did not have language for. The man owed her nothing because he had given her nothing, and now he had left her nothing. The accounts balanced. Miss Underwood. Yes, sir. There is one other matter. The lawyer reached into his desk drawer, and he pulled out something that did not belong in this century. A yellow manila envelope, sealed with red wax, a round wax seal pressed into it with what looked like the tail end of a hammer. He slid the envelope across the desk, and this time, slowly, carefully, as if she might break it, or it might break her. Rosie reached out and took it. It was heavy. It was lumpy. She felt the shape of something hard inside, something cold, something that had been waiting. What is this? I do not know precisely. You don't know. I have my suspicions, but I am instructed not to share them. Instructed by who? He looked at her over the top of his glasses. By your grandfather. She turned the envelope over in her hands. Her name was on the front, in a long, narrow, careful script. Rosalind May Underwood, her middle name. She had not seen her middle name in writing in 8 years. The group home had only ever called her Rosalind, or Underwood, or, when they were tired, just Girl. Whoever had written her name on this envelope had known her completely, had known the small middle name no one used. Miss Underwood. The envelope was placed in my safekeeping 9 years ago, with instructions that it was to be given to you upon your 18th birthday, or upon the reading of his will, whichever came later. 9 years? Yes. He prepared this 9 years ago. Yes. She looked down at the envelope. Her hands were shaking. She had been so good for so long at not shaking, at not feeling, at not letting any of it through the thick walls she had built brick by brick. Over 8 long years of sleeping in rooms with girls who screamed in their sleep and never trusting anyone with anything that mattered. And now her hands were shaking over a piece of yellow paper. Mr. Caldwell. Yes. Why did he wait 9 years to give this to me? The lawyer was quiet for a long moment. He looked down at his hands, and then up at the books on his wall, and then finally back at her. He was waiting for you to be old enough to understand. Old enough to understand what? Read the letter, Miss Underwood. Why can't you just read the letter? His voice was not unkind, but it was final, the way an old church door is final. There would be no further answers from this man. Not today. She nodded. She stood up. She tucked the envelope inside her oversized jacket and held it there with one hand pressed flat against her chest, as if it might fly out, as if it might disappear. She turned toward the door. Miss Underwood. She stopped. Yes, sir. He was standing now too, slowly, with effort, his hands braced on the edge of the desk. Be careful, he said. Careful of what? He held her eyes. Some doors, once you open them, you cannot close them again. She waited. He did not say more. So she walked out. The bell on the front door of the law office tinkled behind her. The afternoon light hit her in the face. She stood on the sidewalk holding the envelope to her chest, and she watched the cars go by, and she did not know where to go, because for the first time in 8 years, she had somewhere she could go. She just did not know if she should. She did not open the envelope on the city bus. She did not open it in the small diner where she spent 2 of her precious dollars on a cup of coffee just to have a place to sit. She did not open it in the bus station, where she stared up at the departure board for 40 minutes, watching the city names flicker, trying to decide if she would just buy a ticket south, to anywhere, to Arizona, to Texas, to a state she had never been to, where no one knew her, where she could start over. She had $1,400. She could disappear with $1,400. She could rent a room, get a job at a diner, become someone else by Christmas. That was what a smart girl would do. That was what a survivor would do. A girl who had survived the system for 8 years did not chase ghosts up into the mountains of Oregon. A girl who had survived did not let herself hope, because hope was the thing they used against you. Hope was the thing that made you reachable. So she stood at the counter, and she opened her mouth, and she meant to ask for a ticket to Phoenix, and what came out of her mouth was, "One way to Birch Hollow, Oregon." The woman behind the counter did not even blink. $47. Rosie pulled the bills out of her wallet with hands that would not stop trembling. Bus leaves in 20 minutes, gate 4. She found a seat in the back of the bus by the window. The bus pulled out of the station with a hiss and a shudder. The city slid past her in panels of glass and concrete. The freeway opened up. The buildings shrank. The sky widened. And then, hours in, when the city was gone and the farmland had given way to forests, and the forest was getting darker and taller, with the bus full of strangers all sleeping or reading or staring at their phones, with no one watching her. She finally opened the envelope. It was not stuck. It opened easily, as if it had been opening itself for 9 years, in the dark of a lawyer's safe, just waiting. She tipped the contents into her lap. A key fell out, a heavy iron key, the size of her palm, pitted with rust, cold, old in a way modern things were never old, and a folded piece of paper, not modern paper, heavy parchment, yellowed at the edges, folded in quarters. She unfolded it. It was a hand-drawn map. She had expected a letter. She had braced for a letter. She had not braced for a map. There was a road, a dirt track, a ridge marked with hatching, and a circle in red ink with an X in the middle, and next to the X, in the same long, narrow script as her name on the envelope, there were 5 lines. The door is on the north face of the ridge. The key fits only one lock. What you find is yours. What you choose is yours. Trust what you find. That was all. No letter, no explanation, no name signed at the bottom, just a map, and a key, and 5 sentences from a man she had not seen in 8 years. She held the parchment in her lap, and the iron key in her hand, and she looked out the window at the long, dark trees blurring past in the dusk, and the bus rolled north, and she did not feel afraid, which was strange, because everything in her life had taught her to be afraid of unexpected gifts. But this did not feel like a gift. It felt like a beginning. It felt like the first sentence of a long story that someone had been writing for her. The bus dropped her at a crossroads. A single yellow light blinked overhead. A gas station hummed on one corner. A diner with a red neon sign on another. A general store with a faded painted sign that said Greenfields sat in the middle of it all. It was almost dark. The air smelled like pine and rain and something green and cold that Rosie had not smelled in 8 years. She stood there with her duffel bag at her feet, and she looked around at the small, empty town, and she felt her chest do something strange, something tight, something almost like recognition. She had been here before. She did not remember it, not exactly, not the way an adult remembers things, but her body remembered. Her feet remembered the way the gravel sounded under them. Her lungs remembered the air. She picked up her duffel bag and walked into the general store. A bell jingled overhead. A woman behind the counter looked up. A woman in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat braid, with a soft, round face, with reading glasses on a beaded chain, with hands that had clearly done a lifetime of work. And the woman saw Rosie, and the woman went very still, and the reading glasses fell from her nose and caught on the chain and bounced against her chest, and the woman did not seem to notice. "Rosalind," Rosie froze. How? How do you know my name?" The woman came out from behind the counter, slowly, carefully, the way you approach a wild animal, with both hands open and visible, with her face soft, with her eyes filling. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm sorry. I think you have me confused with. You look just like your mother." Rosie did not move. She could not move, because no one had said the word mother to her in 8 years. No one had said it out loud, not to her face, not in her presence. Her mother had been gone since Rosie was 11, and the group home had treated the word mother like a private joke, like something you did not bring up in mixed company, like something that might make the food taste worse. And now this stranger in a country store, in a town she had never been to, had said the word, like it was nothing, like it was a fact. "You don't know my mother." "I knew her since the day she married your father, baby." Sit down. Sit down right here on this stool right now before you fall over." Rosie sat down. Her legs went out from under her. The stool caught her. The woman moved a glass of water in front of her, from somewhere. Rosie did not see where it came from, and put one warm, soft hand on Rosie's shoulder. "Breathe." "I am breathing." "No, honey, you're not. Breathe." Rosie breathed. She had not realized she had stopped. The woman stood there with her hand on Rosie's shoulder and waited and did not say anything else, and let Rosie breathe. And the bell over the door jingled, and no one came in, and the lights of the store hummed. "My name is Pearl Greenfield," the woman finally said. "Okay, I've owned this store for 38 years. Okay, and I have been waiting for you for 8 of them." "What?" Pearl pulled up a stool of her own. She sat down across from Rosie. She took Rosie's hand and turned it over and looked at Rosie's palm and ran her thumb across it and let out a long, shaky breath. "You have your mother's hands. Please, please tell me how you know my mother." Pearl looked up. Her eyes were the same color as Rosie's eyes. Rosie had not noticed that until that moment. Gray, like rainwater, because your grandmother, honey, your grandmother was my sister. The room tilted. Rosie put a hand on the counter to steady herself. The stool was suddenly the only thing under her. The store was suddenly far away. "I have a grandmother. You had a grandmother." She passed when you were 2. Lung cancer. She never smoked a day in her life. She just got it anyway. Lord works in strange ways. My grandmother. Her name was Adeline. She was the kindest woman God ever set down in Oregon. And when she passed, your grandfather, my Hank, your Hank, he went to pieces. He took your father and they moved out of town for a while. They came back when your father met your mother. Lovely girl, lovely, lovely girl. And then your parents. Well, Pearl stopped. She did not finish. My parents died when I was 11. I know, baby. In a car accident. Pearl closed her eyes. She closed them tight. That is what they told you. That is what they told me. There is more to that story, honey. more than I can tell you, more than I have the right to tell you. And my grandfather sent me away the same week. Yes. Why? Honey, why did he send me away? Why did he never write me? Why did he leave me there for 8 years? Pearl opened her eyes. There were tears running down her cheeks now, slowly, steadily, as if she had been saving them up. I cannot tell you that, sweetheart. I gave him my word a long time ago that I would not tell you, that the only person who could tell you was him. He's dead. I know, so no one can tell me. Honey, so no one is ever going to tell me. Pearl took her hand again and squeezed it and held it and looked at her with those gray eyes that were Rosie's own gray eyes, and the silver braid trembled where it lay over her shoulder. He left you the answers, baby. What? He left you the answers. He told me the day before he died. He said, Pearl, if she ever comes, tell her I left her the answers. Tell her she has to find them herself. But they are there. They are all there, waiting for her. Rosie pulled the iron key out of her pocket. She set it on the counter between them. It made a small, dull sound on the wood. Pearl looked at the key, and Pearl smiled, a small, slow, bittersweet smile. There you go, she said softly. There it is. She put a brown paper bag on the counter. She walked around the store and put things into it without being asked. Bread, a jar of peanut butter, 2 apples, a flashlight, spare batteries, a bottle of water, a box of crackers, a roll of toilet paper, a flannel blanket she pulled off a shelf in the back, a small jar of honey. I can pay, Rosie said. He paid. What? Your grandfather. He left an account at the store every month for 8 years. He told me, he said, Pearl, set this aside for the day she comes. Every month, 8 years, honey, look at me. Rosie looked at her. He never forgot you, not for a single day. She walked the 5 miles up the road to the property. The road went from pavement to gravel to packed dirt. The trees pressed in. The sky narrowed to a thin gray ribbon overhead. The flashlight Pearl had given her bounced in front of her on the road. Her duffel bag bumped against her hip. The brown paper bag of groceries was tucked under one arm. The iron key was in her front pocket. The map was folded inside her jacket. It started to rain. Not hard, just a soft, cold drizzle that found the back of her neck. She kept walking. She passed a stone wall that looked like it had been there 100 years. She passed a fork in the road where a dead birch tree leaned over a small black pond. She turned left, and then, after another half-mile, she passed something that stopped her, a mailbox, no name, just numbers, burned into a piece of cedar, the address from the map. She stood there in the rain, and she looked at the mailbox, and she felt something behind her ribs, a small, hot, aching thing. He had ordered mail here. He had walked down to this mailbox. He had lived here in this exact spot while she had been sleeping in a metal bunk bed in a building with 30 other girls, eating mashed potatoes from a steam tray, wondering if anyone in the world knew her name. He had been here the whole time. She walked up the long dirt track to the property, and it was just as Pearl had described it. The dirt track ended in a wall of overgrown blackberry and alder. There was no house, no cabin, not even the ruins of one, just 5 acres of wild brush, and behind it, a long stony ridge rising up in the rain. Rosie almost cried. She almost sat down in the wet ferns and cried and gave up. Because of course this was the joke. Of course this was how it ended. She had come all this way. She had spent the last of her money. She had let herself hope, and there was nothing, just rocks, and rain, and ferns, a worthless piece of land. She pulled the map out of her jacket. The rain was hitting it. The ink was beginning to run. She covered it with her hand, and she read again, "The door is on the north face of the ridge." She looked up at the ridge. It rose like a long, sleeping animal out of the wet earth, moss-covered, slick with rain, almost vertical in places, towering, indifferent. But there was a door on it. He had told her. She had to trust. She started climbing. She fell twice in the first 10 minutes, once on a slick patch of moss, once when a root she trusted, with her weight pulled clean out of the soil. She tore her jeans at the knee. She scraped both hands. The rain came harder. The light was almost gone. Her flashlight beam jumped and bobbed on the rocks, and she was going to give up. Except her foot slipped. A patch of earth slid down the slope ahead of her, just a small avalanche of dirt and small stones, and ferns, and moss, and revealed a corner, a flat, gray, rectangular corner of something that was not rock, concrete. Rosie dropped to her knees. She dug, with her bare hands, with her fingernails, with every breath she had. She tore up the moss. She pulled out the ferns. She scraped away 10 years of fallen leaves and pine needles and soil and slow forest growth. And she uncovered a square of concrete set flush into the side of the ridge. In the center of it, a heavy steel door, no handle, just a single dark keyhole, and rust like dried blood across the surface of the metal. She sat back on her heels, in the rain, in the dark, with mud on her face and her hands torn and bleeding, and she pulled the iron key out of her front pocket, and she looked at it. It looked exactly the right size. She wiped the keyhole clean with the cuff of her ruined jacket. She put the key into the lock. It went in halfway and stopped. She pushed. It did not move. She pushed harder. The key sank a 1/4 inch deeper and stopped. "Come on." She pushed again. "Come on, come on." The key would not go. She closed her eyes. She put her forehead against the cold steel of the door. The rain ran down the back of her neck and under her collar. She thought she might scream. She thought she might cry. She thought she might lie down in the mud and let it cover her up. And then she heard her grandfather's voice in her head. She had not heard it in 8 years. She had thought she had lost it, but it was right there, as if he had spoken into her ear. The voice she remembered from when she was small, from when she used to sit on his lap on the porch, and he taught her how to skip stones across the river. "Easy, little Rose. Don't fight it. Let it find the lock." She breathed out. She loosened her grip. She turned the key a hair to the left, and then to the right, and then, without forcing it, she let it sink. The key slid the rest of the way in. She turned it. There was a long, deep, groaning sound from somewhere inside the door, from somewhere inside the mountain, a sound like an old animal waking up. Something heavy moved. Something inside the metal gave way, and the door eased outward, just 1/2 inch, as if it had been holding its breath for 30 years, and was finally letting go. Rosie stood up. Her legs shook. She grabbed the edge of the door, and she pulled. It was heavier than anything she had ever pulled in her life. It opened, slowly, inch by inch, with a terrible screaming of metal on metal that startled a flock of crows out of the trees above her and sent them up into the rainy sky in a black cloud, until the door was open just wide enough for her to slip through. She turned on her flashlight. She held up the beam. She stepped inside. And then she stopped. She stopped breathing. She stopped moving. She stopped being a girl with a flashlight on a rainy ridge in Oregon and became something else, something smaller, something stunned, because what was in front of her was not a small room, it was not a hole in the ground, it was not what anyone in town had told her to expect. It was a staircase, a long, wide, cement staircase lit by something, something not her flashlight, a soft, pale, greenish light coming up from somewhere below. The staircase went down, down, down past landing after landing. She could not see the bottom. She took one step inside the door. The rain stopped, the wet stopped, the cold stopped. The air inside was dry and cool and smelled like cedar and paper and something else, something she could not name, something old, something kept. She turned around. She looked at the open door behind her. She could leave. She could turn around. Right now, run down the ridge, walk the 5 miles back to town, sleep in Pearl's store, catch the morning bus, take her $1,400, and go anywhere, and forget all of this. Forget the key, forget the map, forget the staircase that should not exist inside a hill. She could be safe, or she could go down the stairs. She stood there for what felt like a long time. The rain blew sideways through the open door behind her. The flashlight trembled in her hand. The pale green light from below rose up the stairs in soft waves, like breath, like something underground was breathing. She thought of Pearl. She thought of $1,400 in a brown envelope. She thought of the iron key, made for her, waiting for her, 9 years. She thought of her grandfather, the carpenter, whose voice she had just heard for the first time in 8 years. Easy little Rose, let it find the lock. She pulled the heavy steel door closed behind her. It clanged shut, locked itself, trapped her inside. She started down the stairs. The first landing was wider than her bedroom at the group home. That was the thought she had, as her flashlight swept across it, as her shoes touched concrete that was clean, swept, cared for, as the pale green light from below cast long, soft shadows across walls that were paneled in real wood, in honey-colored pine, with small frame pictures hanging on them. This landing is bigger than my whole room. For the last 8 years, she stepped onto the landing. She turned in a slow circle. There were doorways, 3 of them, heavy wooden doors with iron hinges, one straight ahead, one to the left, one to the right, and the staircase kept going down, past this landing, down to another one, and below that, another one, and below that, another one. She stood in the center of the landing, and she looked up at the small frame pictures on the wall. The closest one was a black and white photograph of a baby in a christening gown, with dark curly hair and enormous eyes. The photograph had been carefully matted and framed and hung at exactly her eye level. Her own face looked back at her. She was the baby in the photograph. She had never seen this picture in her life. The next photograph over was her at maybe 2 years old, on a man's shoulders, both of them grinning at the camera, the sun in their eyes. The man was her grandfather, younger, stronger, with dark hair instead of the white she half remembered. The next one was her in a blue dress at maybe 4, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. The next one was her at 6, front teeth missing, a construction paper hat on her head. The next one was her at 7, the next at 8, the next at 9, the next at 10. And then the pictures kept going, past 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, pictures of her from the years she had been in the group home, pictures she did not know existed, pictures she had not posed for, pictures of her on a sidewalk, in a park, behind a school bus window, at a public library checkout counter, with her face turned just slightly, as if the photographer had been very far away, with a long lens, with patience, with love. He had been taking her picture for 8 years. He had been watching her for 8 years. The girl who thought no one was watching, the girl who thought no one knew her name, the girl who had built walls, the girl who had stopped looking up, the girl who had decided she would never let herself be loved again because love was a thing they took back. He had been there the whole time. She did not cry, not yet. She just stood in front of the wall for a very long time. She put her hand on the photograph of her at 12, the one where she was reading a book on a bench at the park. The librarian had taken her on a field trip that day. She remembered the bench. She remembered the book. She remembered that she had thought she was completely alone in the world. She had not been alone. She traced the edge of the frame with her finger. She moved on. She opened the door to the left. It swung in, easily, as if it had been opened that morning. The room beyond was a wood shop, a full wood shop, with a workbench down the middle, with pegboards holding hand tools, all arranged in perfect order, all clean, all oiled, with a small lathe in one corner, with a bandsaw, with sawdust on the floor like the man working there had stepped out for lunch. The smell hit her first. Cedar, pine, linseed oil, sawdust. It was the smell of her grandfather. It was the exact smell of him. The smell of his shirts when he had picked her up. The smell of his hands when he held her face. The smell that lived inside her body, in the deepest part of her, in the part of her that knew, without thinking, what home was. She walked into the wood shop. She walked slowly. She walked the way you walk through a church. The shelves along the back wall were lined with objects, carved objects, wooden objects. She raised her flashlight. The closest one was a small wooden horse, a carved wooden horse, beautifully made, with a flowing mane, with its tail lifted, with one foreleg raised as if mid-step. It had been sanded smooth, polished, loved, and carved into its side, in neat, careful letters, Rosalind, age 7. She picked it up. It was warm in her hand, warm the way wood is when it has been touched 1,000 times, the way it gets when a person has held it, and held it, and held it, for years. She set it down. She picked up the one beside it, a wooden bird, with its wings spread, with its head turned. Rosalind, age 8. The next was a wooden cat, curled into a perfect circle, with its tail wrapped around its paws. Rosalind, age 9. The next, a wooden fox. Rosalind, age 10. The next was a small wooden house, a doll's house, with a porch and a chimney and tiny shingles and a door that opened, with 4 small carved figures inside, a father, a mother, a little girl, and a tall, white-haired grandfather. Rosalind, age 11, the year he had sent her away. She picked it up with both hands. She held it the way you hold a thing that might break. And the carvings kept going. A wooden owl for age 12, a wooden rabbit for age 13, a wooden horse and rider for age 14, a wooden book with carved pages for age 15, a wooden swallow for age 16, a pair of wooden shoes for age 17, and then, at the end of the shelf, the newest piece, still smelling faintly of oil, a small wooden door, with a wooden key resting beside it. Rosalind, age 18. He had been carving her a present every year for her whole life. He had carved her birthday presents from across the silence, from across the lie, from across the country he had pretended to throw her away into. He had stood in this room, alone, in the lamplight, with his careful hands, with the wood between his palms, and he had thought about her on her birthday every year, and he had carved her a gift she would never receive because he had not been allowed to send it, because something had stopped him, something dangerous, something with a name, something that was waiting somewhere outside this hill, right now, while she stood here in the lamplight, holding a doll's house, with 4 small figures inside. The flashlight slipped out of her hand. It hit the floor. It rolled into the corner. The beam pointed at the wall, and the wall was paneled in wood, and the wood was carved. The whole wall was a carved relief of a young woman with dark curly hair, smiling, with a wreath of wildflowers in her hair, in a long white dress, holding a bouquet. It was a portrait of a bride. She crossed the room slowly. She reached the wall. She pressed her hand against the carved wooden face, and the carved wooden hair, and the carved wooden wreath of wildflowers, and the carved wooden bouquet. The bride was her mother. She knew it without anyone telling her. The way she had known about the smell of cedar, the way she had known her grandfather's voice. Her body knew, her bones knew. This was her mother, on her wedding day. Underneath the carved portrait, in small, careful letters, he had written 4 words, Eveline, forever my girl. Rosie pressed her forehead against the wooden wall, and finally, after all of it, after the lawyer, after the long bus ride north, after Pearl in the store with her grandmother's eyes, after the rain, after the door, after the photographs of her own face on the wall, after the wooden horse with her name on it, she cried. She cried the way a person cries who has been carrying 8 years in her chest. She cried the way a person cries who finally understands that the silence was not silence. The silence had been full of love. The silence had been full of carving. The silence had been a man in a wood shop, cutting his granddaughter's name into a piece of pine. Every single year, every single birthday, every single time he had broken her heart by not coming, she cried until she could not stand up anymore. She slid down the wall and sat on the sawdust floor. She held the doll's house in her lap, and she breathed, she breathed, she breathed. When she could move again, she did not know how long it had been. Time had stopped working properly the moment she stepped inside the door. She wiped her face with her sleeve. She picked up the flashlight. She picked up the doll's house. She tucked it under her arm, and she walked out of the wood shop, back to the landing. 3 doors. She had opened one. She crossed to the other door, the one straight ahead, the one she had not yet opened. She put her hand on the iron handle. She pushed. The door swung in, and Rosie made a sound she had never made before, a small, wordless sound, because the room on the other side of the door was a garden underground, inside a mountain, a long, vaulted, stone-walled cathedral of a room with a curved ceiling that arched 20 feet above her head, and running along that ceiling, a series of polished mirrors, each one as long as a car, each one angled, each one catching light from somewhere outside the mountain, from shafts she could not see, from skylights cut into the ridge, and bouncing that light down, down, through prisms, through more mirrors, down, onto a long sunken garden bed in the center of the room, a garden bed filled with flowers, living, growing, flowers. Inside the earth, a small stream ran along one side of the room, pumped from somewhere, trickling softly, catching the soft mirror light and throwing it back up to the ceiling in dancing patterns. The walls of the garden room were stone. The stone was carved. The carving showed scenes. A woman in a garden, the same woman from the woodshop wall, her mother, in carved stone, tending flowers, a small child running through a field, Rosie at 3 or 4, a young man with a fishing pole, her father. She had only seen one photograph of him in her whole life, and the man on the wall was him, the carved stone hands, the carved stone face, her father. As a young man, she walked slowly down the center of the garden room, and at the very end of the room, on a small wooden pedestal, behind a glass case, sat a bouquet of dried flowers, wild flowers, faded almost to white, with the colors only ghosts of themselves now, tied with a slim white ribbon. A wedding bouquet hung above the glass case. In a small carved wooden frame was a photograph, a real photograph, color, faded, a young woman in a long white dress, holding the same bouquet that sat below it in the glass, a man in a brown suit standing next to her, looking at her like she was the entire world, her parents, on their wedding day. He had kept the bouquet. Her grandfather had kept her mother's wedding bouquet underneath a mountain, in a glass case, in a stone garden, lit by mirrors. Rosie sank to her knees in front of the pedestal. On the small wooden ledge in front of the glass case was an envelope, a regular cream envelope, with her name on the front, Rosalind, in the same careful hand. She picked it up with trembling fingers. She broke the wax seal. She opened it. There were 5 pages inside. She unfolded them. She held the flashlight steady. She began to read, "My dearest Rose, if you are reading this, then you have found the door, and you have come down the stairs, and you have walked through the rooms I built for you, and you are sitting somewhere in this place, tired and cold and full of questions I did not let anyone answer. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I want you to know first, before anything else, before any explanation, before any history, I want you to know I did not abandon you. I never abandon you. For 1 second, for 1 breath, for 1 beat of my heart, I did not abandon you. What I did was the hardest thing a man has ever had to do, and I would do it again, because I would do anything to keep you alive. And to keep you alive, I had to make the world believe that I had thrown you away, that I did not love you, that you were nothing to me, because there was a man, there is a man named Donovan Hatch. And 8 years ago, he told me, looking right into my eyes, standing on my front porch with the rain coming down behind him, that if I did not give him what he wanted, he would kill you. He would kill my granddaughter, the only thing I had left of my son and of your mother, the only thing I had left in this whole hard world. So I had to make you disappear. I had to make you so small and so quiet and so far away that he could not find you, that he could not touch you, that you could grow up and get strong and get tall and be ready for the day you would find out, Rosie, my Rose, you have a family. You have a great aunt named Pearl who has loved you every day of your life from a distance. You have a town that knows your name. You have a story. And underneath this mountain, in the rooms I built with my own 2 hands, you have everything you need to finally know the truth. The truth begins with your parents. They did not die in a car accident. I am sorry to tell you this in writing, but I cannot tell you in person, and you must know your mother and your father were murdered by Donovan Hatch." Rosie's hand went to her mouth. The pages shook in her other hand. The light from the mirrors danced softly on the stone walls. Somewhere above her, the rain was still falling on the ridge. Somewhere out beyond the mountain, in the dark, wet town of Birch Hollow, a bell was ringing on the door of Pearl Greenfield's general store, and a quiet old woman was waiting to come find her tomorrow morning with breakfast and answers. But here, right now, underneath the earth, in a stone garden lit by mirrors, in front of her mother's wedding bouquet, Rosie sat on the floor, and she did not stop reading. She would not stop reading until she knew everything, even if it broke her, even if it remade her, even if it took the whole long night, because for the first time in her whole life, someone had told her the truth, and the truth was that she had been loved. The truth was that she had always been loved. The truth was that she had a name and a family and a history and a door that her grandfather had built for her. She turned to the second page, and she kept reading. She read the second page, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth. When she finished, she did not move. She sat on the cold stone floor in front of the glass case with the wedding bouquet inside, with the soft mirror light playing on the walls, with the small stream trickling on her right, with the letter folded back in her lap. Her parents, both of them, the woman in the wedding photograph, the man in the brown suit who looked at her like she was the entire world, had not died in a car accident, had not been carried away by something random, by something that happens to people. Her parents had been murdered by a man named Donovan Hatch, who had wanted a piece of land, who had hired men, who had arranged a car accident on a stretch of mountain road where there was no railing, where the canyon dropped 200 feet, where the only witness had been a 13-year-old boy fishing on the bank below. The boy had told the police. The police had not listened. The boy had grown up. He had become an old man. His name was somewhere in this mountain, inside one of these doors, waiting. Her grandfather had written, "The man who killed your parents is still alive. He is the reason you grew up alone. He is the reason I gave you up. If I had not let him believe I had thrown you away, he would have killed you too, and he would have killed me, and no one would have ever known what he did to my Eveline and my Daniel." Eveline, that was her mother's name. Daniel, that was her father's. She had not heard the names out loud in 8 years. She had been 11, standing in the funeral director's office with her social worker holding her hand, and someone had said, "Evelyn and Daniel Underwood, beloved daughter-in-law and son, taken too soon," and then they had closed 2 caskets in the same room in the same week, and no one had said the names again. Rosie pressed her hand against the glass case. The wedding bouquet on the other side was so close, just an inch of glass between her fingers and the dried flowers her mother had carried down an aisle. "Evelyn," she whispered it. She had not spoken her own mother's name aloud since the day of the funeral. "Evelyn, Daniel, Evelyn, Daniel." She said their names, the way you say a name to call someone back from wherever they have gone. The flowers did not move. The mountain did not answer. But Rosie, for the first time in a very long time, felt something in her chest. That was not fear. That was not grief. That was not loneliness. It was anger, a small, hot, steady anger, the kind that does not burn out, the kind that lives inside a person for a very long time, the kind that gets things done. She stood up, slowly. Her knees hurt, her back hurt, her ankles hurt. She had been sitting on stone for she did not know how long, hours, maybe more. She picked up the doll's house. She picked up the letter. She picked up the flashlight. She walked out of the garden room. There was a third door on the landing. She had not opened it yet. She crossed to it now. She put her hand on the iron handle. She pushed. The third room was small, the smallest of the three, not a workshop, not a garden, a room with a single chair, a small wooden chair, hand-carved, with a worn red cushion, set in the exact center of the room, facing one wall, and on that wall hung a single object, a wedding dress, long, white, with small embroidered flowers on the bodice, with pearl buttons running up the back, covered in a thin, clear bag to keep the dust off. Her mother's wedding dress, pinned to the wall, like a portrait, like a prayer. There was a small lamp on a side table. There was a small carved wooden box. On the table next to the lamp, there was a Bible and a photograph, the same photograph from above the glass case, her parents on their wedding day. This was where he sat. This was the room where her grandfather sat, and looked at the dress, and looked at the photograph, and missed them. For all the years they had been gone. Rosie walked across the room. She sat down on the chair. The cushion was worn down on one side, where a man much larger than her had sat, reading, praying, grieving. She picked up the small wooden box. She opened it. Inside was another photograph. This one she had never seen, a baby in a hospital bassinet, with dark, wet, curly hair, with eyes squeezed shut, with tiny fists curled up. Rosalind May Underwood, day of birth, on the back of the photograph, in her grandfather's careful hand. Welcome to the world, my Rose. Your grandfather will love you forever. She closed the box. She put her hands over her face. She did not cry. She had already cried. She just sat in her grandfather's chair, in her grandfather's quiet room, in front of her mother's wedding dress, and she breathed, and she let the small, hot anger keep burning inside her chest. The chair creaked when she shifted. She had been a baby once. She had been someone's granddaughter. She had been someone's everything, and the world had tried to make her forget. But the world had made one mistake. The world had not counted on a man in a wood shop, carving small horses with her name on them every year for her whole life. She slept that night. She did not mean to. She had meant to keep going, to keep reading, to find the next room, to go deeper down the stairs, but her body, eventually, said no. She found a cot in a small alcove on the first landing, beside the photograph wall, a simple cot, a wool blanket folded at the foot, a clean white pillow, as if it had been made up that morning, as if he had known. She lay down without taking off her muddy jeans. She pulled the blanket up to her chin. She fell asleep watching the wall of photographs. She slept without dreaming. For the first time in 8 years, she woke to soft light coming from somewhere she could not place, a morning light, yellow, warm, falling across the floor in long, slow bands. She sat up. She rubbed her eyes. The lamp in her grandfather's quiet room was still on. The pale green light still rose softly up the staircase from below, and now, mixed with it, was sunlight, real sunlight, coming down from somewhere above her. She got up. She walked to the staircase. She looked up, far above, at the top of the steel door, where the door met the concrete ceiling. There was a small slit, a horizontal opening cut into the stone, carefully, cleverly, just at the right angle to catch the morning sun. He had cut a window into the mountain for light. She walked back across the landing. She picked up the flashlight. She did not need any more. She walked to the staircase and looked down. The stairs went down to the next landing. She started down. The second landing was darker, colder. The walls here were not paneled in honey-colored pine. They were stone, bare, cold, damp. There were no photographs here, no carvings, just one heavy iron door, with a single word carved into the wood lintel above it. Truth. Rosie stood in front of the door for a long moment. She breathed in, she breathed out, she opened it. The room beyond was a vault. There was no other word for it. A square stone room with a low ceiling, with 3 of its 4 walls lined floor to ceiling with cabinets, metal cabinets, industrial cabinets, the kind you see in old offices, with long, thin drawers labeled in a careful hand. She walked slowly along the wall. She read the labels. Hatch Enterprises, 1985 to 1990. Hatch Enterprises, 1990 to 1995. Hatch Enterprises, 1995 to 2000. Hatch Enterprises, 2000 to 2005. Hatch Enterprises, 2005 to 2010. Hatch Enterprises, 2010 to 2015. Hatch Enterprises, 2015 to present. 35 years. A man had spent 35 years cataloging another man's crimes. She pulled open one of the drawers. It slid out smoothly, recently oiled. Inside were folders, hundreds of folders, color-coded, labeled, tabbed, each one filled with documents, photographs, audio cassette tapes, newspaper clippings, court filings, names, dates, bank routing numbers, bribe amounts, property surveys, threats, witness statements that had never been used in any trial. A whole life of being watched, of being recorded, of being known. Donovan Hatch had been a man who thought he was invisible. He had been very wrong. Rosie pulled a folder out at random. It was labeled Alder Valley, 1999. She opened it. Inside was a photograph of a small farmhouse on fire, a photograph of a man standing in front of the smoking ruin with a clipboard, smiling at a colleague. Rosie knew the man. She did not know how she knew the man. She had never seen him, except in a single photograph that had been on the news years ago in the social worker's office, where she had been sitting waiting for an interview that never came. The TV in the corner had been playing the news, and a man in a gray suit had been on the screen. Some kind of charity gala, donating money to a children's hospital. Donovan Hatch. She closed the folder. She closed the drawer. She walked along the wall. There was a small wooden desk on the back wall of the vault, with a single lamp and a single chair, and on the desk, set out neatly, waiting, was a leather book the size of a Bible, with a small brass clasp on the side, with no title. She crossed to the desk. She sat down. She opened the leather book. She had expected another ledger, another list, another file. Inside was a federal identification card, laminated, faded. The picture was her grandfather, many years younger, with dark hair, with the same steady eyes. The card said, Henry Underwood, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Organized Crime Division, employment terminated, retired with honors, 1985. Rosie stared at the card for a long time, a long, long time. The lamp on the desk hummed softly. The photographs in the cabinets behind her whispered with their 35-year secrets. He had not been a carpenter. He had been an FBI agent. For 25 years before he became a carpenter, He had retired in 1985. The bookshelves had been a cover. The whole time, the whole life, the bookshelves had been a cover. She turned the page of the leather book. There were notes inside, handwritten, careful, dated. The first entry was from 1985. Donovan Hatch, suspect, real estate fraud, likely tied to 3 murders along the Oregon corridor. No physical evidence. Refused to drop case despite directive from above. Recommended for surveillance escalation. Denied. The next entry, 1987. Hatch acquired Verdant Valley property through coerced sale. Original owner found dead in woodshed. Local sheriff ruled suicide. Did not match medical findings. Reported up the chain. Reassigned within the week. The next, 1989. Hatch funding 3 local political campaigns. All campaigns successful, including the district attorney election. Investigation into Hatch was officially closed at this level. Bureau will not pursue. 1991. Began parallel investigation off the books. Brought in only my brother-in-law. He keeps the legal documents. I keep the field documents. No paper trail at the Bureau. Brother-in-law. Rosie stopped reading. Her finger paused above the page. Brother-in-law. Whose brother-in-law? She skipped ahead. 1985. Took early retirement. Bureau pension. Moved to Birch Hollow. Built a workshop. Will continue the work alone. With Edmund Caldwell, the lawyer, the old man with the magnified eyes, in the leather chair, in the dusty office. He was her grandfather's brother-in-law. She had family, and that family had been in the same room with her yesterday, across a mahogany desk, looking at her like she was something he had loved from a great distance for a very long time. Be careful. Some doors, once you open them, you cannot close them again. That was what he had said. He had been begging her to open the door. He had been the one who held the door for her. She turned the page again. She read 15 more years. She read about the dozens of small landowners who had been forced off their property by Hatch, by threats, by arson, by accidents, by murder. She read about the small-town newspapers that had been bought up and silenced, the judges that had been seated, the investigators that had been transferred or fired or retired early. She read about her grandfather's slow, patient archive, built one folder at a time. She read about her father, about a young man who had once tried to help his old man find justice, who had reached out to a reporter in Portland, who had been getting close to bringing the whole story to a state attorney who could not be bought. And then, page 72, she read, September 14, 2018. Hatch sent men last night. They were waiting in the driveway when Eveline and Daniel came home. They had been at the courthouse all afternoon. Daniel had filed the affidavit. They thought the worst was behind them. They were laughing. I heard them laughing as they pulled into the drive from the window of my workshop. Then the men came out of the trees. I ran. I did not have my weapon. I did not have anything. They put Daniel and Evelyn in their own car. They drove the car up to Witch's Bend. They forced it over the cliff. I followed too late. I got there as the car was already down in the canyon. I climbed down through the brush. They were both dead when I reached them. Daniel had been shot first. Eveline had been alive when they sent the car over. There were marks on the inside of the window. From her hands, she had tried to get out. For my granddaughter, for my Rosalind, she had tried. But she did not get out. Rosie made a sound she had not made before, a small animal sound. The lamp on the desk hummed. She closed the leather book. She closed her eyes. She put her forehead down on the desk. She breathed, she breathed, she breathed. She did not cry. She had no tears left. She just sat with her head down on a desk in a stone room, and the small hot anger that had started in the garden room now had a face and a name and a list of crimes 35 years long. And it had a granddaughter who was very much alive and who was now sitting on top of all of his evidence. She climbed back up the stairs. She climbed slowly. She felt very old. She felt very young. She felt like she was a piece of paper that had been folded too many times and was tearing along the creases. She reached the first landing. She walked past the wall of photographs. She walked into the garden room. She did not know why. She just needed to be near the wedding bouquet. She just needed to be near her mother. She sat down on the stone floor in front of the glass case. She put her hand against the glass, and then, from very far away, above her, through the long staircase, through the steel door, came a sound, a knock, a polite, patient knock. On the steel door at the top of the ridge, Rosie stood up. Her heart stopped. For a full second, her heart stopped. Then it started again, harder, faster. Hatch. It was Hatch. He had found her. He had been watching. He had known. He had come for the granddaughter. She backed up against the wall. The knock came again. Then a voice, faint, muffled, but unmistakable. "Rosalind, honey, it's Pearl. I brought breakfast." Rosie put her hand over her mouth. She laughed. She laughed. She did not mean to laugh, but the laugh came out anyway. A high, half-broken, slightly hysterical laugh. Pearl. It was Pearl. Pearl with breakfast. She ran up the staircase. She took the steps 2 at a time. She nearly fell at the top. She wrestled the heavy steel door open. She squeezed through, and there, in the soft morning sun, on the wet ground, in a cardigan and a long blue skirt, with a wicker basket over one arm and a thermos under the other, with her silver braid hanging over her shoulder, with reading glasses on a chain, stood Pearl Greenfield, looking at her like she was a sunrise. Oh my goodness, Pearl, you look like you slept in a coal mine. I did. Well, Sit down on that log right there, right now, before you fall down. Rosie sat down on a fallen log. Pearl sat down next to her, with the basket between them. She unscrewed the thermos. She poured something hot into the lid. She put it in Rosie's hands. "Drink." "What is it?" "Coffee with a lot of cream." "I don't." "Drink it, baby." Rosie drank it. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. Pearl unwrapped a cloth napkin and pulled out a slice of warm apple pie with a little wax paper wrapped fork stuck into the crust. "Pie for breakfast." My grandmother always said, "Apples are a fruit. Crust is a grain. Breakfast is whatever you want it to be when you are 19 and you have just been through a lot." Rosie ate the pie. She ate it in tiny, careful bites. Pearl sat next to her, quietly, hands folded in her lap, looking out at the wet morning trees, not pushing, not asking, just sitting, until Rosie was ready. "Pearl." "Yes." "He was an FBI agent." Pearl turned her head. She looked at Rosie, slowly. "You found the vault." "I found the vault." "Lord, he was an FBI agent. He moved here in 1985. He was a carpenter for cover. He was watching Donovan Hatch his whole life." Pearl closed her eyes. She nodded. "Yes." "You knew." "I knew. Edmund Caldwell knew. He knew. My father knew." Pearl opened her eyes. She looked at the trees again. "Your father was the one who almost ended it. Your father was a brave young man. He went after Hatch, properly, with the law. He thought he could finish what your grandfather started. And Hatch killed him. Yes. And killed my mother. Yes. And then my grandfather sent me away, because if Hatch had known about me, he would have killed me too. Yes. And no one ever told me. No one ever told you. And no one ever came for me. Pearl turned her whole body toward her now. Her face was set. Her gray eyes were bright. Her silver braid trembled where it lay over her shoulder. Rosalind May. Yes. Don't you ever say that to me. Don't you ever say that no one ever came for you. But no one. He came for you every Sunday. What? For 8 years, every single Sunday. Your grandfather drove 312 miles round trip to the group home. He worked as a part-time groundskeeper there. He pulled the weeds in their flower beds. He fixed the gutters when they leaked. He repaired the playground equipment when the boards rotted. He was there every single Sunday, from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, for 8 years. The cup of coffee in Rosie's hand began to shake. What? You don't remember a Mr. Halloran? An old gardener at the home, quiet, kept to himself, always brought baked goods on Sunday, used to leave a single cinnamon roll on the kitchen windowsill of the girls' wing. On the windowsill. That was him. Mr. Halloran was him. Rosie set the cup of coffee down on the log. Her hands were not working anymore because she remembered Mr. Halloran. She remembered his stooped shoulders, his big, gentle hands, his white hair, the way he wore the same brown jacket every Sunday, no matter the weather, the way he had never spoken to her directly, but the way she had always known, whenever she crossed the courtyard, that his eyes followed her, the way she had once, as a 15-year-old, caught him watching her through the kitchen window while she was eating her lunch, and he had looked away quickly and gone back to his rose bushes. She remembered the cinnamon rolls. She remembered that the cinnamon rolls had always appeared on her birthday, every single birthday. And there was one Sunday. She remembered this now. She was 11. Her parents had just been buried. She had been sitting on a bench, crying. A handkerchief had appeared next to her on the bench, a clean white folded handkerchief. She had taken it. She had wiped her face. When she looked up, the old gardener had been across the courtyard with his back to her, pruning a shrub, whistling softly to himself. She had kept the handkerchief. She still had it in the bottom of her duffel bag. Right now, Pearl was crying too, quietly, without sound, just tears running down her soft face. He was there with you, baby. He was there with you the whole time. He could not speak to you. He could not touch you. He could not tell you his name, because if Hatch ever found out, he would have killed you. So he just watched from the rose bushes every Sunday for 8 years. Honey, he was there. Yes, he was there the week after my parents died. Yes, he was there when I graduated middle school. He sat in the back row. Pearl, I know, Pearl. I know, sweetheart. Pearl took her in her arms. Rosie did not resist. Pearl was small and warm and smelled like flour and like the powder her grandmother had probably used. Pearl rocked her on the log, right there in the morning sun on the soggy ground, with the steel door of the bunker yawning open behind them, with the wet birds calling through the trees, with the whole impossible truth pouring down on top of her. She had not been alone, not for one Sunday, not for one birthday, not for one bowl of mashed potatoes. He had been right there, pulling weeds. The whole time, she was still crying,
quietly in Pearl's arms when the phone in her pocket rang, a small, cheap burner phone, the one the social worker had given her 2 days ago as a parting gift. She pulled it out. The number was not one she recognized, but she knew, the way she had begun to know things, she knew it was Edmund Caldwell. She answered, "Rosalind, I know. You know what? I know that you are my great-uncle by marriage, or something like that. I cannot do the math yet, but I know." There was a long silence. "You found the vault." "I found the vault." "Then I am glad you know. Mr. Caldwell, Edmund, Edmund. Listen to me, Rosalind. We have a problem." The little hot anger in Rosie's chest flared up. It became something larger. "Tell me." "Donovan Hatch filed an emergency claim against the property this morning." "What?" "He produced a promissory note. He claims your grandfather signed it 9 years ago, securing a debt against the land. He claims your grandfather defaulted on it before he died. He is asking the court to grant him the title to the property." "The note is fake." "Of course the note is fake. He forged my grandfather's signature." "Yes. How is he doing this so fast?" "He has a judge. He has filed for an emergency hearing. We have 48 hours to respond, or the court grants him the title to that land." "He cannot have the land." "No, he cannot." "No, sweetheart, he cannot." "Edmund." "Yes. The vault is on that land." "I know. Everything is on that land. My grandfather's whole life is on that land. My mother's wedding dress, the carvings, the letters, the evidence, every piece of evidence we have against him, it is all on that land." "I know. If he gets the title, he will destroy it. He will scrape the entire ridge clean and pour a foundation by spring. We have 48 hours. Rosie stood up from the log. She walked in a small circle. She came back. She sat down. She stood up again. "What do I do?" "You come down here with the contents of the vault. All of it. As much as you can carry. The most important pieces. You and I and one other person are going to sit down in a conference room and prepare a filing the world has not seen in 30 years. We are going to put this man in chains by the end of the week." "What other person?" "I am calling her now." "Calling who?" "There is a woman. Her name is Marjorie Penrose. Your grandfather saved her life 15 years ago. She has been living off the grid in eastern Washington under another name for 15 years. She is the only living witness to what Hatch did to her own family and to many others. My grandfather saved a woman 15 years ago." "Yes." "And kept her hidden for 15 years." "Yes." "Edmund, what is it, child? How many people have been waiting for me to grow up?" There was a long, slow, quiet breath on the other end of the line. "Many, Rosalind. How many?" "More than you know." She did not say anything for a moment. Pearl was holding her hand on the log. Pearl was squeezing it, gently, steadily. All right. Tell Marjorie Penrose that I am coming down with my grandfather's life." "I will, sweetheart." "And Edmund." "Yes, I want to see him before we do this." "Who?" "Hatch." There was a long silence. "Rosalind, I want to see him in a courtroom with everything we have. I want him to look at my face, and I want him to know that my grandfather did not throw me away. I want him to know that my mother tried to get out of the car with her hands on the window. I want him to know that every Sunday for 8 years, the man he tried to destroy was pulling weeds in a children's home, waiting for me to grow up." The line was very quiet,
And then Edmund Caldwell, the old man with the magnified eyes, cleared his throat, the dry sound, like leaves. Rosalind, yes, your father would be very proud. She closed her eyes. She felt the morning sun on her face. Thank you, Edmund. She hung up. She put the phone back in her pocket. She turned to Pearl. Pearl was already standing. Pearl had picked up the wicker basket. She had emptied half of it onto Rosie's lap. 2 more wrapped scones, a boiled egg, a small jar of preserves, a wedge of cheese in wax paper, an apple. You are not going down there on an empty stomach, child. I have to pack. You pack while you eat. There is too much to carry. Then we will only carry the worst of it. Pearl. What? I need help. I am here. I cannot do this alone. You are not alone. Pearl. What? I have not had family in a very long time. Pearl set down the basket. She put both of her warm hands on Rosie's cheeks. She tilted Rosie's face up so they were looking right at each other. You have always had family. We just were not allowed to come for you. And now we are allowed. And now you have us, and we have you, and nobody is taking that away from either of us again. Rosie nodded. She wiped her face. She stood up. She walked back toward the open steel door. Then she stopped. A car was coming up the road. She could hear it through the trees, a long way off, the low growl of an engine, the crunch of tires on gravel, coming closer. Pearl heard it too. Pearl went very still. Who is that? I do not know. Pearl. I do not know, sweetheart. The engine got louder. Rosie's hand went to her pocket, where the iron key was. Pearl moved closer. The 2 of them, the old woman and the young woman, stood at the mouth of the door in the side of the mountain, with the morning sun on their backs, and listened to the engine come closer. A car came around the last bend in the dirt road, an old gray sedan, pulling to a stop 50 feet down the slope. The engine cut off. The driver's door opened. A woman got out. She was somewhere in her 50s, tall, thin, with short gray hair, with a long dark coat, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of weather and patience. She walked up the slope toward them, slowly, the way you walk on a path you know, with her hands open and visible, with her eyes fixed on Rosie. She stopped 6 feet from them. She did not extend her hand. She did not smile. She just looked at Rosie for a long moment. Then she spoke. I knew your father. Rosie's breath caught. You did. He came to my house 3 days before he died. He asked me to keep something safe for him. He told me, if anything ever happens to me, find my daughter. Tell her I tried. Tell her I'm sorry. The woman swallowed. Her face was very still. I have been keeping it safe for 8 years. What? He gave me a copy. A copy of what? Everything. He had been making copies of your grandfather's files because he knew Hatch was getting close. He gave me a copy of everything for you. Rosie did not move. She could not move. Pearl made a small sound next to her. My name is Marjorie Penrose, the woman said. Your grandfather pulled me out of a burning house 15 years ago. He gave me a new life, and your father gave me a name, yours. The morning sun caught the tears in Marjorie's eyes, but she did not let them fall. She just stood there, tall, steady, with 8 years of evidence in her car, waiting for Rosie to say what came next. Rosie stepped forward. She did not say anything for a long time. She just looked at this woman, this stranger, who was not a stranger, who had been carrying a piece of her father in her trunk for 8 years. The way Pearl had been carrying a brown paper bag of groceries, the way her grandfather had been carving wooden horses with her name. She put one hand out. Marjorie took it. Marjorie's hand was thin, strong, callous. "You came," Rosie said. "Of course I came," Marjorie said. "I thought no one was coming." Marjorie's mouth did something small, something that was almost a smile, but it was not a smile. It was the look of a woman who had spent 15 years preparing for this exact morning. "Honey, we have all been coming the whole time. You just could not see us." Rosie looked back over her shoulder, at the open steel door, at the staircase descending into the lit mountain, at the wood shop, and the garden, and the photographs, and the wedding dress, and the wedding bouquet, and the vault of 35 years of evidence, at her grandfather's whole life. She turned back to Marjorie. She turned back to Pearl. She squared her shoulders, the shoulders that had been too small for the donation bin suit jacket, the shoulders that had been folded inward for 8 years, so as not to take up too much space in the world, so as not to be seen, the shoulders that were now going to carry something enormous. "All right," Rosie said. "All right," Pearl said. "All right," Marjorie said. "Let's go inside." The three of them worked through the morning. Pearl carried the wicker basket. Marjorie carried 2 empty file boxes from the trunk of her sedan. Rosie led them down the staircase, past the photograph wall, past the wood shop, past the garden room, past her grandfather's quiet chair, down to the second landing, to the iron door with truth carved above it. Marjorie stopped at the threshold. She put her hand on the door frame. She closed her eyes. "I have never been inside this room," she said. "He told me about it. Once, 15 years ago, he said, 'If anything ever happens to me, there is a vault with everything we need. Get to my granddaughter and get to the vault.' You have been carrying that for 15 years. I have been carrying that for 15 years. Marjorie." "What, child?" "You can go in." Marjorie opened her eyes. She walked in. She moved through the room the way a person moves through a cathedral, with her hands clasped, with her face soft. She read the labels on the cabinets. She touched the leather book on the desk with the tips of her fingers. She did not open it. She just put her hand on the cover and kept it there, the way you might put your hand on a friend's coffin. She turned around. "All right," she said. "Tell me what you have decided to take." Rosie had been thinking about it all the way down the stairs. She had a list. The leather book, the original case file, with his ID. Yes, the Hatch Enterprises folders from 2018, the year my parents died. Yes, the Alder Valley folder, the arson photographs. Yes, all of the audio cassettes. We do not have time to listen to them. We bring them all. Yes, my grandfather's personal logbook, the one with the dates of every meeting Hatch had, with every official. Yes, and the wedding bouquet. Marjorie looked up. She looked at her. "Sweetheart, and the wedding bouquet. That is not evidence. It is evidence to me." There was a long pause. Pearl said softly, from the doorway, "Bring the bouquet, sweetheart. Bring it." So they brought the bouquet. By noon, they had 2 file boxes packed, the leather book, the folders, the cassettes. Pearl had wrapped the glass case of the wedding bouquet in her own cardigan. Marjorie had wrapped Rosie's mother's wedding dress in clean white paper. They carried everything up the long staircase, past the wood shop, past the photograph wall, out the steel door, into the noon sun. The sun was warm now. The rain was a memory. The forest dripped quietly all around them. Marjorie loaded the boxes into her trunk.
Pearl held the wrapped wedding dress across her arms like a sleeping baby. Rosie closed the steel door. She turned the iron key in the lock. She listened to the deep groan inside the mountain as the door sealed itself. She put the key on a leather cord and put the cord around her neck and dropped the key beneath the collar of her shirt. She kept her hand on it for a moment, through the cloth, where it lay against her chest, right above her heart. The key was warm now, body heat. It had been cold for 9 years. It was warm now. It was going to stay warm. They drove down the mountain, Marjorie at the wheel, Pearl beside her, Rosie in the back with the wedding dress across her lap. They drove through the gravel road and the dirt road and the dead birch tree and the stone wall, past Pearl's general store, through the small main street of Birch Hollow. People came out of their shops as they passed. A man at the diner stepped out onto the sidewalk and watched. A woman at the post office stood very still in her doorway. "They know," Rosie said quietly. "They have always known baby," Pearl said. "Known what?" "Known that this day was coming." "How?" "Honey, your grandfather lived in this town for many years. He never told anyone what he was doing. He did not have to. People know, people in towns like this. They know." Rosie looked back at the disappearing town through the rear window. A bell over a door somewhere was ringing in the wind. Edmund Caldwell was waiting for them in his office. He had not slept. His tie was loose. His glasses sat on his desk. His white hair was wild from where he had been running his hand through it. The desk was covered with paper, with law books, with yellow legal pads filled in his spidery handwriting. He stood up when they walked in. He looked at Rosie. He looked at the file boxes Marjorie was carrying. He looked at the wedding bouquet under Pearl's arm. He sat back down. He covered his face with both hands. He cried. He cried without sound, the way old men cry, with his shoulders shaking, with his thin, elegant hands pressed against his closed eyes. He cried for maybe a full minute, while the three of them stood in his office with their boxes and their evidence and their borrowed cardigans, saying nothing. When he stopped, he wiped his face with a handkerchief. He put on his glasses. He stood up again. "Ladies, let's get to work." They worked for 36 hours. They worked through the night. Pearl made coffee. Marjorie decoded her grandfather's handwriting. Edmund prepared affidavits and counterfilings and emergency motions. Rosie sat at the conference table with her grandfather's logbook open in front of her, and she found, cross-referenced, highlighted, marked, the names, the dates, the accounts. She slept 4 hours on a couch in Edmund's office. She woke up to Marjorie shaking her shoulder. "It is time. It is time. Yes, child. Already. Yes." She washed her face in the small bathroom of the law office. She put on a clean white blouse Pearl had brought from the store. She brushed her hair. She looked at herself in the mirror. She did not look like a girl from a group home. She looked like a young woman with gray eyes. That were her grandmother's. That were her mother's. That had been waiting for a long time to open all the way. She walked into the courtroom on Edmund Caldwell's arm. Pearl walked behind them, holding the wedding bouquet wrapped in her cardigan. Marjorie walked beside Pearl, holding the leather book. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, old, with high windows letting in the late afternoon light, with a dozen people scattered in the public benches, with a court clerk and a bailiff, with a judge at the bench, a man with a tired face and steady eyes. He was not the judge Hatch had paid for. He was not the judge Hatch had expected. Edmund had filed for a change of venue. He had filed it at 4 a.m. He had gotten it because it turned out that Edmund Caldwell had been preparing his own brief, quietly, For 30 years, at the table on the right, sat Donovan Hatch. Rosie saw him for the first time. He was older than she had imagined, tall, silver-haired, with a slightly tanned face, with an expensive gray suit, with a small gold pin in his lapel from some charity. He was reading something on a piece of paper. He looked up when the side door opened. He looked at Edmund, then at Pearl, then at Marjorie, then at Rosie. He stopped looking. He just stared. He had not known about Rosie. He had not known that the grandfather had not in fact given up the granddaughter. He had not known that a great-aunt named Pearl Greenfield had been keeping a brown paper bag. He had not known that a witness named Marjorie Penrose was still alive. His face did not change much, but his hand went very still on the paper he was holding. The piece of paper began, slowly, to slide out of his fingers. It landed on the table. Hatch did not pick it up. He just kept looking at Rosie, the way a man looks, at the door of a vault he had thought he had locked many years ago. That had just opened. The judge called the court to order. The lawyer stood. Hatch's lawyer was a young woman in a sharp navy suit. She did not know what was about to happen to her. She stood up with confidence. She presented the promissory note. She said the words foreclosure and default and emergency claim. She was crisp, professional, brief. She sat down. She thought she had won. Edmund Caldwell stood up. He cleared his throat. The dry sound, like leaves. He did not look at Hatch's lawyer. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, before we address the question of the promissory note, the defense would like to submit additional evidence pertaining to the business practices of the plaintiff. He laid a thick folder on the bench. The judge began to read. 2 men in dark suits stood up in the back of the courtroom. They walked slowly down the center aisle. They did not look at Hatch. They did not have to. The judge looked up. He looked at Hatch. He looked at Edmund. He looked at the leather book Edmund placed on the bench next to the folder, and the audio cassettes in a small plastic crate, and the photographs of a smoking farmhouse in Alder Valley. And then the judge did something Rosie did not expect. He looked at her. A young woman in a borrowed white blouse, in the second row of the spectator benches, with her great-aunt on one side and a witness from 15 years ago on the other, and a wrapped wedding bouquet on her lap. The judge held her eyes for a long moment. He nodded once. Slowly, he turned back to the courtroom. He said, I am going to recess for 1 hour to review this material. Mr. Hatch, you will remain in this courtroom. Hatch's lawyer began to object. The judge cut her off. You will remain in this courtroom, Mr. Hatch. The bailiff stepped forward. The 2 men in dark suits moved to either side of Hatch's chair. Hatch did not stand up. He was, for the first time in many decades, not in control of the room he was in. The recess was an hour. It felt like a year. Rosie sat in the small consultation room with Pearl, with Marjorie, with Edmund. Pearl had brought sandwiches in a paper sack. Nobody could eat. He is going to lose, Edmund said. He is going to lose, Marjorie said. He is going to lose, Pearl said. He is going to lose, Rosie said. She said it like a prayer. She said it like a song. She said it the way her grandfather, in the wood shop, had said it every year as he carved another wooden horse, or another wooden owl, or another wooden door with her name on it. Wait, 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 my Rose. He is going to lose. The judge came back at exactly 1 hour. He sat down. He took off his glasses. He set them on the bench. He looked at Donovan Hatch. Mr. Hatch,
Your Honor, the court is dismissing your emergency claim with prejudice. Hatch did not speak. The court is also referring the entirety of this material to the Office of the State Attorney General for criminal investigation, effective immediately. The two men in the dark suits stepped forward. One of them, the taller one, took out a folded paper from inside his suit jacket. He spoke softly to Hatch. Hatch did not stand up. The man took him by the elbow. Hatch stood up. He did not look at the judge. He did not look at his own lawyer. He looked at Rosie. Their eyes met. Across the small courtroom, across 30 years of crime, across 2 murdered parents, across 1 stolen childhood, across 1 man in a wood shop carving wooden horses with her name on them. Hatch's mouth moved. He did not say anything out loud, but Rosie could read the shape of the word. How did this happen? How did you find me? How did you survive? Rosie did not say anything. She just held his eyes for a long moment, the way a girl holds the eyes of a man who took her mother and her father and her grandfather and her childhood and tried very hard to take her too and lost. Hatch looked away first. He always was going to look away first. The men in the dark suits walked him out of the courtroom. The courtroom door closed behind them. It was over. Rosie did not move. For a long moment, she just sat in her chair and realized she had been holding her breath. For 30 years, she had not lived through. For 30 years, that had been waiting to be exhaled. She let it out. She closed her eyes. She put her hand on her chest, where the iron key was, hanging on its cord, against her skin, warm now, always warm. She opened her eyes. The light through the high windows of the courtroom had turned gold. Outside, the first leaves of autumn were beginning to fall. Through the soft, golden air, past the courthouse windows, onto the steps of the courthouse, where she would walk out, in a few minutes, a free girl, a whole girl, a girl with a family, a girl with a name, a girl with a wedding bouquet in her lap. The story spread fast. The local paper ran the story on the front page. The state paper picked it up. The story went out on the wires. A reporter from Portland drove 4 hours up to Birch Hollow and stood on the porch of Pearl Greenfield's general store and asked if he could interview the granddaughter. Pearl told him to come back next month. Pearl told him, the girl needs to rest first. The reporter came back next month. He sat with Rosie in the back of the store. Pearl made tea. Rosie told him exactly as much as she wanted to tell him, and no more. The investigation went wider than anyone expected. Hatch's records did not just contain his own crimes. They contained the records of 2 judges, 3 county commissioners, a retired sheriff, a former state legislator, a real estate developer in California, a man who ran a bank. By spring, 6 other men were indicted. By the next fall, a new district attorney had been elected. By the year after, the county was a different place. Rosie did not stay for any of it, not directly. She gave her depositions. She gave her testimony. She signed her papers. And then she went back up the mountain to the place she had inherited to do what she had decided to do. The first thing she did was leave the steel door open. She did not lock it. She propped it open with a stone. She did not need to hide anymore. The second thing she did was clear the brush. She and a small crew, whom Pearl had hired with the money from her grandfather's estate. Once it was sorted out, and once it turned out that her grandfather's estate was actually quite substantial, because there was a savings account Pearl had not known about, because Edmund Caldwell had been quietly investing her grandfather's pension. for many years on her grandfather's behalf for Rosie, because Rosie, it turned out, was a young woman of some means. She had not known any of it. She cried about that one too, but only quietly, while she was clearing the brush, while the sun was on her face, while the saws hummed in the trees behind her. She had the wood shop clean. She had the garden room repaired. She had skylights cut into the ridge above the garden room to bring in more real sun. She had the photograph wall preserved exactly as it was. She had her grandfather's quiet chair restored and kept exactly where he had left it, with the wedding dress hanging on the wall. She built a house, a small wooden house, above ground, on the same site where her grandfather's old house had once been. She found the foundation under the brush. She built on top of it, with the help of 3 carpenters from town who knew her grandfather's work, and built in the same style, a 2-story house with a wrap-around porch, with a stone chimney, with wide windows facing east to catch the morning sun. She did not live there alone. She had not planned this part. It happened slowly, over the course of a year, and then 2 years. It began with a girl named Hollis. Hollis was 16. She was the first one. She had aged out of her own foster placement. A friend of Pearl's, who worked in the regional social services office, had called Pearl one afternoon. "Pearl, there is a girl with nowhere to go. Send her up. Pearl, she is in rough shape. Send her up." Hollis arrived in October with a single backpack, with dark circles under her eyes, with a wariness Rosie recognized in her own bones. Rosie did not ask her any questions. She just gave Hollis a key, a small wooden key that Rosie had carved herself in the wood shop over the summer, sitting at her grandfather's workbench with her grandfather's tools, with his hands inside her hands, guiding her. "This is for you. What does it open? Your room. Yes, sweetheart," Hollis cried, standing in the doorway of the new wooden house, with the wooden key in her hand, the way a baby holds a rattle, with her whole fist, with her arm tight to her chest. She cried for a long time. Rosie did not say anything. She just stood beside her, the way Pearl had stood beside her in the general store months earlier, saying nothing, letting her breathe. That was the first one. By the next summer, there were 3. By the summer after, there were 6. The local social services office had a name for what she was running. They had to, because Rosie had insisted on doing it legally, with all the paperwork, with the regular inspections, with the licenses. They called it a transitional home for young women aging out of state care. The town of Birch Hollow called it something else. The town called it Rosie's house. The girls who lived there called it something else again. They called it home. Pearl came up every Sunday. She brought groceries. She brought pies. She sat at the kitchen table with the girls and listened to them talk about school, about boys, about bad teachers, about complicated grief, about what they wanted to do when they grew up. Pearl listened, with her gray eyes, with her silver braid, with her hands folded in her lap, the way she had listened to Rosie on a stool in a country store on a wet evening in October. Marjorie came on Saturdays. Marjorie taught the girls how to chop wood, how to read a map, how to drive a stick shift, how to know when a man was telling you the truth and when he was not. Edmund Caldwell drew up the trust paperwork. Each girl got a small trust set up in her own name with money from Rosie's grandfather's estate that paid out a small monthly stipend when they were ready to move on. The bunker was open. She had not closed it. The girls used it for many things. The wood shop was a workshop now. They made furniture. They made carved wooden gifts.
They made small wooden keys for new arrivals. The garden room was a greenhouse. They grew tomatoes and lettuce and herbs. The vault she had kept locked at first. She had moved the original files to a fireproof safe in the new house. The vault was empty of evidence now. She used it as a quiet room, a room for the girls to go when they needed to be alone, when they needed to cry, when they needed to be inside a stone room with no one watching until they were ready to come back out. She had hung one thing in the vault, the wedding bouquet, in its glass case, in the center of the empty room, a reminder to anyone who walked in that somebody had loved somebody long ago, enough to carry the dried flowers for all those years. In the third winter, she had a visitor she did not expect, a young woman, about Rosie's age, maybe a year or two older, with dark hair pulled back, with expensive boots, with a coat that was too thin for an Oregon December. She drove up the road in a small rental car. She stopped at the bottom of the driveway. She did not get out for a long time. Rosie was on the porch, with a mug of coffee, watching her, through the snow that was beginning to fall. Finally, the woman got out. She walked slowly up the drive, like a person who did not know if she would be turned away. Her boots crunched on the new snow. She climbed the porch steps. She stopped at the top. She did not say anything for a moment. "You are Rosalind Underwood." "Yes, my name is Sylvie. Sylvie Hatch." Rosie did not move. The mug of coffee was hot in her hands. The snow was falling, softly, on the railing of the porch. The girl in front of her was Donovan Hatch's daughter. The girl was crying. She was crying, without sound. "I did not know. I know. I did not know what he did. I did not know about your parents. I did not know about anything until the trial. I know. I know. What? He locked me in my own room when I was 8 years old for a month because I tried to tell my mother he was hitting her." Rosie set the coffee mug down on the porch railing. "He locked you in your room for a month?" "Yes." "Sylvie, I am sorry. I should not be here. I did not know where to go." "Sylvie, look at me." Sylvie looked up. Her face was wet. Her mascara was running. The snow was settling in her dark hair. "Come inside, Sylvie." "I cannot." "You can. I am his daughter." "Honey, you are not. You are the person he locked in a room for a month when you were 8. Come inside." "I cannot." "Sylvie." "What?" "Did your father ever pull weeds in a children's home for 8 years to watch you grow up?" Sylvie blinked. "No." "Then you and I have something very important in common. Come inside." Sylvie did not move. She just stood there, on the porch, in the falling snow, holding her thin coat closed at the throat. Rosie opened her arms. She did not say anything else. She just opened her arms. After a long moment, Sylvie walked into them. Rosie held her while she cried, right there on the porch, while the snow fell, while inside the house, Hollis was making dinner, and Pearl was reading by the fire, and the new girl, a small, thin 14-year-old named Renly, who had arrived in October with a wooden key on a string and had not yet spoken a full sentence, was watching them through the kitchen window in the spring when the snow had melted and the wildflowers had come back to the meadow at the foot of the ridge. Rosie walked up the mountain alone. She walked through the open steel door, down the staircase, past the photograph wall, past the wood shop. She did not stop at the garden room. She walked all the way down to the vault. She stood in the empty stone room. She walked to the center. The glass case sat there, on its small wooden pedestal. the dried wedding bouquet inside, the faded ribbon, the ghost of the colors. She knelt down in front of the case. She put her hand on the glass. "Mom, Dad," she said it out loud. "I wanted to tell you. I built a house on the foundation of the old house, the one I cannot remember, the one I was born in, the one where I was a baby, with both of you. It is a good house. There are 8 girls living in it right now, and me, and Pearl on weekends, and Sylvie." She took the iron key out from under her collar. She held it up to the glass. She let it touch the case. A tiny, dull tap. "I am taking care of his life. I am taking care of his story. I am taking care of yours and mine. I am taking care of the girls, and I am taking care of myself." She sat back on her heels. She wiped one eye. She smiled. "I forgive him, my grandfather. I forgive him for sending me away. I know he was scared. I know he was protecting me. I know it nearly killed him to do it. I forgive him, and I miss him, and I miss both of you, and I love all 3 of you, and I am all right." She stood up. She put the iron key back under her collar. She turned and walked toward the door. She walked out of the vault. She walked up the long staircase, past the photograph wall, where her own face, at every age, looked back at her. She walked out the open steel door. She did not close it. She left it open behind her, the way her grandfather, in his last letter, had told her to leave it. "The door is yours. What you do with it is yours." But Rose, my Rose, if you choose to keep it open. She walked down the path through the wildflowers. The new wooden house came into view, with its stone chimney, with its wide windows, with its wrap-around porch, with Pearl's car parked in the drive, with 7 figures sitting on the porch steps in the late spring sun, drinking lemonade, talking, laughing softly. Sylvie waved, Renly waved. Hollis stood up and yelled something Rosie could not hear, but she could hear the laugh that followed. Rosie walked down to the house. The girls made room for her on the steps. Hollis put a glass of lemonade in her hand. Pearl reached over and squeezed her knee. Without a word, Rosie sat down between them. She looked up the ridge. She could see, from the porch, if she squinted, the faintest gray line of the open steel door set into the side of the mountain, catching the afternoon light. She had not closed it. She would not close it, because a door that had been opened in love by a man in a wood shop, with his careful hands, with wooden horses on his shelves, with his granddaughter's name carved into every year of his exile, was a door that was meant to stay open. She lifted her glass. She drank. The lemonade was cold and sweet and tart, and the sun was setting, and the girls were laughing, and in the kitchen somebody had started singing, and from inside the new house, through the open windows, the smell of dinner was rising, and the smell of bread, and the smell of a home that had been built on the foundation of love that did not give up, even when it looked like silence, even when it looked like absence, even when, for 8 long years, it looked like goodbye. It had not been goodbye. It had been wait, and she had waited, and he had waited, and they had found each other across the years, across 2 graves, across 1 mountain, through 1 iron key, hanging warm against her chest. She finished her lemonade. She handed the empty glass to Hollis. She stood up from the porch step. She turned toward the house. She opened the screen door. She walked inside. Home.